allowed to start the academy when budget and time permits. And we've been through some training that the fire department has allowed us to go through to keep us active on that list, and that's our main desire. And the reason for us coming here today is because we were told that this is the budget committee that possibly deals with the budgetary situations as far as the fire department is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Scott Weber, and I'm also a recruit with the City of Los Angeles Fire Department. Just to reiterate and underscore what my fellow recruits expressed this morning, we are all acutely aware of the historic financial crisis facing the city. But in light of the extreme amounts of money that the city has already invested in us, we've all been through, because of our time on the list, we've all been through multiple background checks, multiple physical exams, and as my fellow recruits stated, we've all taken in part in drill academy fitness orientations on the weekends. I think anytime any organization hires a body of people, one of the biggest challenges is that they're an unknown quantity, and with us, we've been road tested, we've been through the process, and for the city to start at zero and start with a brand new set of recruits would not be in the best interest of the city or the Los Angeles City Fire Department. So again, I thank you all for your time, and we hope you'll consider our situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just ask, is there anyone in the audience from Personnel Department? Or is there a CAO analyst for the Fire Department? Okay, raise your hand. Let me just say to all four of you, I appreciate you being here. The Budget Committee deals, and you accurately stated it, as far as the funding for classes. But if your request is to extend a list, that is in the purview of civil service in the Personnel Department, and I'd ask the CAO analyst maybe to get you directed to the right place, because we have no authority to extend lists or to get involved in the mechanics of the personnel process. We do, in this committee, deal with the funding, and maybe we can just get you to the right place where you can make that request. I can't guarantee that how they will react to it, but certainly you get your voice through civil service and the personnel department. Is that would be the accurate process?
Susan Nakafuji with the Personnel Department. I don't know the specifics of these gentlemen's information, but we can certainly speak to them and take their information.
If you could do that for us, because it appears that they're on a list, it's about to expire. Because we're not funding a class, it appears that their list will expire and they'll have to start all over again. And so that's what they're asking for, the issue of extending the list, which we have no purview to do. So maybe you can advise them on what their alternatives are.
Sure, we can talk to them.
Thank you. She will talk to all four of you. Thank you very much for being here.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let me ask on the, let's see, ask on the two grant items that we continue, we can have those done at the same time.
Item 2 was continued from the December 6th meeting. It's a CAO report relative to a grant acceptance packet for the County of Los Angeles Community and Senior Services Dispute Resolution Program. Item 3 was also continued from December 6th, and it's a CAO report relative to a grant acceptance packet for continuation funding for the California Victim Compensation Board.
Okay. Good morning. Good. Let me just have a couple of questions so we can have a full committee report.
Sure.
Can you give us an overview on item 2 on the number of participants that are a part of this program?
Do you mean volunteers or the people who utilize the program?
Utilize it, primarily utilize, and then I have another question about the volunteers.
Okay. Mm-hmm. The number of people who utilize it, I think we get a few thousand each year. Mm-hmm. I don't have the exact number in front of me. Mm-hmm. And we have currently trained 1,800 volunteers. We have a training class going on upstairs right now. There are about 30 new volunteers getting ready to come into the program.
Okay. Did we exhaust all of the funding for last year's program? Are there any funding that has rolled over?
We exhausted all of the funding for last fiscal year. None rolled over for us.
Let me ask you, there was a request on the last time we approved this, is whether your office and the CAO looked at the whole issue of the cap rate on volunteers. Is that a reasonable?
We looked at the cap rates. The issue is that there are statutes and regulations, and according to the regulations, it specifically states that volunteer personnel services shall be valued at no more than $25 per hour. We currently charge that in-kind services. That is a specific section of the Dispute Resolution Program Act statutes and regulations.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter the sources of that $25 an hour. We just charge that per hour, and that is the upper limit as specified in the regulations.
Okay. Then my final question would be, can we use increased number of volunteer hours to reduce the impact on the city's budget?
We could, but we would need more staff persons. Now, this year, I am planning to retire. And so I'm hoping that whoever assumes responsibility for the leadership of this program is able to do far more than I have been able to do in the years that I've overseen this program. So we will be able to do that. It will have to be, however, under the leadership of another person in the dispute resolution program.
And currently, you said we have 1,800 volunteers?
1,800, we do.
And the class that's going on
Right now, currently, as we speak. I came down from the class.
Does that add to the 1,800?
That adds, yes.
Okay.
That does add. And we currently charge about $200,000 per year
Okay.
in services that they provide us.
Okay. And so what would this class bring that 1,800 to?
Well, it's actually above 1,800. That's what I hold to until I get to a couple of thousand. So we have more people that we have actually trained over the years. Those 1,800, I am absolutely confident about them having completed the classroom training and are available for services. I'm told that we have perhaps another 100, 150 who have completed, but I had not started counting those persons yet.
What's in the class today?
The class today, how many people are in the class? There are about 30 people
30.
who are in that class in room 1035 right now.
Okay. All right, we'll move that item. What I just asked is we did last year, and because it's a cash flow issue, that we historically move these grants as quickly as possible so that we can get the return or the reimbursement during the fiscal year that we're spending.
And I do think that they are reimbursing.
They are reimbursing timely. This grant
Yes.
is reimbursing timely.
This is, yes,
So we'll
each
move-
month.
Okay, we'll move item 2. And then if you could get, before the committee report is done, that one bit of information is how many people used the program.
services,
We can
okay.
give that to the clerk, they can add it to the report.
Okay,
Thank
I
you.
will do that. Thank you.
On item 3,
The report before you is requesting authority to appropriate funding in the amount of $23,693 from the County of Los Angeles for the City Attorney's Joint Powers of Verification Unit. Last year, council approved an agreement for a 3-year allocation to be awarded to the city. The first allocation was approved last year. This is a second allocation. Last year, you requested our office and the city attorney's office to evaluate the cost of the non-reimbursable overhead, with the goal being to reduce or eliminate the overhead. It's my understanding that the department did speak with the state on this issue, and the state advised them that they were not able to modify that for us.
okay. Let me ask, on the program, how many participants per calendar year do we, or is it fiscal year, calendar year?
Fiscal year.
Okay. How many participants in this program?
The verifiers actually process about 2,400 claims per year. They process, in addition to that, 16,000 bills that come from those claims.
16,000 bills?
Bills that come from the 2,400 claims per year.
Okay. And then, what was the amount of money we were reimbursed on the claims last year?
Do you know the total? I think it was about It was over $3 million, I believe. I don't have the total amount with me.
Okay,
but
could we get that to the clerk so we have accurate information?
Yes.
And then I think the CEO commented, what did we do to try to minimize it? The state would not allow us to minimize the overhead? Is that what your comment was?
No, while the cap right now is 15%, so we can only charge 15% reimbursement for overhead. So that's the amount that they are not willing to modify to allow us to increase it from 15 to, let's say, 20 or 30.
Okay. And is this a grant that rolls over, or that we exhausted year to year?
This grant has been exhausted every year.
Okay.
There's usually no surplus funds.
Okay. All right, we'll move that item number 3. If you could get with the clerk and get that information as to the number of participants for last year, that would be helpful. And then also the same instruction we gave last year, if we can ensure that we apply for reimbursement as quickly as possible so we do not have a cash flow issue during the fiscal year.
Okay.
Thank you. So we'll move that item with that instruction.
Okay, item 4 is a CLA report in response to motion Weezer-Rosendahl relative to the implementation and funding of an automated graffiti trafficking program as a means to reduce the prevalence of graffiti vandalism.
Okay.
Where's Jim?
Good morning. You're smiling today. I have my lenses on, I can see you.
I still have my reading glasses on, so. Are you smiling?
Yeah. Why don't you give us an overview? We're doing a little filler here because our committee's on the way.
Are you stalling?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Okay, this report is a follow-up to a Weezer-Rosendahl motion with respect to implementing a graffiti tracking system. And in 2009, the Orange County Sheriff's Department provided to the Van Nuys Division access to their database. And the Orange County Sheriff's Department had developed a software entitled Tracking Automated and Graffiti Reporting System, or TAGGERS is the acronym. And as a result of that pilot that was implemented in the Van Nuys Division, the graffiti task force within that division had realized significant success through the downloading of the photographs that were taken by the Department of Public Works graffiti abatement contractors. And as a result of that, there was a significant increase in the number of arrests. And as a result of that, the department was very interested in being able to implement it on a department-wide basis. So through LAPD's and ITA's efforts, the Orange County Sheriff's Department agreed to provide the software as well as technical support to the department toward implementation at no cost to the city. Within the past several months, ITA has working very closely with the Orange County Sheriff's technical support staff. It's anticipated that the system is going to be available for rollout in about February of 2011. The only glitch is that there is a need for a hardware application called a load balancer, and the reason for that hardware is because of the fact that the department does want to implement it department-wide. There might be some efficiency issues relative to the capacity of the servers. The department did identify additional funding within the forfeited Assets Trust Fund, and our recommendation is to provide the creation of an account within that trust fund to enable the purchase of the additional equipment.
June, let me ask you, any ongoing costs once this is implemented for licensing annual?
The ongoing costs are going to revolve around the smartphones that are necessary to take the photographs to download into the database. The costs for those smartphones are going to be borne by CDBG grant funds. We've recommended to the department that the grant funds be allocated for a 2-year period, so it is guaranteed. So it is guaranteed that the equipment is going to be available this year as well as next year. We're also recommending that because of the fact that CDBG funds have been an ongoing funding source for graffiti abatement for OCB, that in future years that they also allocate additional funding for that purpose. The other issue that I might want to raise to the chair is that the department does believe that in order to enhance the program, at least one cell phone or smartphone should be allocated to each division to be allocated to the officers that are assigned to the graffiti abatement detail. There is a motion pending which will be presented to the committee probably in January with respect to the creation of a new trust fund dealing with technology. So we're going to report back on that motion, and our recommendation would be that as additional monies are obtained through restitution payments, that consideration be given to provide funding to the department for those smartphones.
And that's the restitution on the fines?
Yes.
Now, on the 300,000 or so that we're doing with block grant, they'll buy all of the equipment and whatever. You said they will also take care of the licensing for the first couple of years?
There are no licensing costs because of the fact that the software has been provided to the city at no cost.
Okay. Okay, we'll move that item. Thank you.
Am I done?
You're done. We're going to take just a short recess until Mr. Smith gets here, and what we'd like to do is take it out of sequence, police, fire, and emergency preparedness, because he's only going to be here for a short while. And so that we'll do those three first, and then we'll come back to the larger report.
Okay.
Through with just myself here.
The best way to do it.
CO, second financial status report for fiscal year 2010-11. And did you want to bring up the departments?
Yes,
Start with the EMD?
on those three particularly, yes.
Okay.
And while they're coming up, let me ask Mr. McQuiston and Mr. McCoster, we have cards in. You can come up this time while the staff is coming up. Mr. McQuiston? And so we have police, fire, and emergency preparedness come up front.
Jim McQuiston, you all have my statement. If you look in that statement, you'll find some little quirky things on police comments, and they've been given with a considerable thought. Otherwise, what I did notice was some of the expenses seemed actually a little bit high and should be explained, but I imagine this August body is going to give everybody a chance to explain them fully, so I won't bother giving any more comment than is in my statement.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, Pat McOsker, President, United Firefighters. The FSR that you have identifies a $20 million gap in the fire department's budget, and it makes some drastic recommendations about how to close it. I would urge you to think twice about those drastic changes that you would make, because it would impact public safety very negatively. About half of that $20 million gap is because of about a 2-month suspension of the MCP during brush fire season. You know, the weather was over 100 every day. There was an order given to staff back up, have full, safe staffing, and that was the right thing to do. But obviously it costs more money now. I would say if that's not a legitimate emergency, a good reason to use money from reserves, and we've just heard how the reserves are going to be more than we're projected or budgeted, that nothing is. So I would hope that that half of our problem isn't something that is taken out of public safety now. Regarding the other half, I would say you can save more than that if we can just go forward on the contract that we've tentatively agreed to. About a month ago, we reached tentative agreement on a contract. We haven't been able to put it in front of our members for a vote yet because we can't get accurate wording in the contract that reflects what we agreed to. We're actually willing to voluntarily pay 2% more toward our pension, toward specifically retiree health care. We already pay 9% out of pocket to it. We're ready to pay 11% as long as we can get it accurately reflected and protected, but we haven't been able to get that yet. The contract would save $35 million over the next 42 pay periods, and $14 million this year, or more than you need to more than balance the budget the rest of the year, especially if you take from reserves for that emergency we had during brush fire season this year. Please work with us so we can get full safe staffing. We're going to get people killed if we continue to close more and more fire companies. The recommendations regarding eliminating paramedic positions, command teams, closing a hazmat unit, and expanding the more than 15 fire companies and 9 ambulances that are closed every day right now are very dangerous, and I urge you not to move forward in any of those. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Chief Peaks, could you come up with your staff? And CAO, CLA? When we have the CAO give an overview of your report.
Oh, the overview? Sure.
On the fire department.
Oh, on the fire department,
Okay.
sure.
And then we have the chief and his staff presentation.
Melissa Krantz, Office of the CAO, the fire department discussions on page 23 of the report. Right now, we're projecting an estimated deficit of $20.8 million for the department. Most of this is an increase from the previous deficit reported in the first FSR, mostly due to the temporary cancellation of the modified coverage plan, which is back in place. We have operational plan solutions that reduce this deficit by about $10 million to $10.8 million. The department's projected to meet their revenue targets, and we do have a few transactions recommended in the report. This includes transferring $15 million from the salary sworn account to the constant staffing overtime account to cover a portion of the projected deficit. We also have a transfer of $158,000 from the water control devices account and $490,000 from the state educational account to the field equipment expense account, also to cover a portion of their projected deficit. And we also have a recommendation to approve with MICLA funds the purchase of 32 ambulances. This funding was provided in the adopted budget.
CLA, you have any additional? Okay. Chief?
Well, 13 months ago, when I sat at this table, we were faced with a $26 million deficit in the fire department, and I think through the collective effort of all of our membership, along with council, the mayor, the CAO, everyone, we were able to bring our budget in under budget and actually return some money to the general fund. So I'm real proud of what we did last year. We're faced with a $20.8 million deficit going forward if we do nothing. And I think right now we do have an opportunity. We are planning on modifying our deployment model. Obviously, the council didn't create this budget deficit. The fire department did not create this deficit. The mayor did not create this deficit. The economy created this deficit. And I think what we all need to do is work together, work collectively. We're planning on fully implementing the adopted budget that we received on July 1st. And moving forward, we will expand and enhance the modified coverage plan to meet our budget deficit. It is truly our wish and our desire to bring our budget in as stated, and we do not expect to have a deficit at the end of the year. What we're hopeful for, we're starting our conversations we've had regarding the ATOM software. The ATOM software is up and running. We are having some programming problems with it, but we are starting to get some hard data from it, and it's looking very promising. But in the meantime, what we would like to do is, effective probably January 2nd, move forward with enhancing the modified coverage plan, flex staffing our Squad 48, and redeploying those EMS captains. So that's our plan to bridge that budget gap between now and the end of June.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, thank you, Chief, and I appreciate what you said. I would correct one thing you said. It wasn't the council's fault, it was the department's fault, it was the economy's fault. You put in the mayor in there. I think part of the problem was the mayor's fault. And I asked last week in committee the mayor's office to report back, and I don't see Georgia here today, on what they wanted to do and what they were recommending to do, because as I look at it, $7.4 million of your problem came from his action against the counsel of the chair of this committee who said, don't do it, Mr. Mayor, by eliminating MCP during the late summer months when it was raining. It wasn't the 100-degree weather like the union boss said, but it was actually raining those few weeks when you started it. So Mr. Parks advised the mayor not to do it. He took action without consulting the council and put you $7.4 million there. How much also are you behind because of his unwillingness to follow his own budget, and that is on the getting rid of the EMS captains? How much does that now cost you in your budget?
I'm not sure. I think somewhere around 2.5, the EMS captains. Yeah, somewhere around 2.5 million.
So close to half of the money you're out of budget is due to mayor's actions without consulting the council.
Well, I'm willing to, this is my budget. The fire department budget is my responsibility, and I am going to do everything within my power to make sure that my budget is balanced at the end of the fiscal year the same way I did last year. We had a much larger challenge last year than we do this year. These are very dramatic, drastic times. I realize that, and I'm going to do whatever is necessary to make sure that we do come in under budget this fiscal year.
And I appreciate that. And what I was saying is it wasn't your fault. There were actions that you were told to do against the budget that the mayor wrote and against the will of this council that have put you 50% higher in your error. So that wasn't your fault. And I appreciate your following the mayor's rules and edicts, but much of the problem was created by him, and I asked the mayor's office last week, what do you intend to do about it? And I still haven't heard an answer to that. So I think we need to hear an answer to that. I know the ADAM program. I've seen some of the work. I think it's going to be a great asset to you and help us solve the problem for the future. But getting to July 1st is a concern I have, and I appreciate your willing to sit here and say, I'll fix it. We need specificity to that. I think you're going to say we're going to have that in January.
That would probably be a little bit more too optimistic. I would probably say late February, early March.
Well, the longer you delay, the more impossible it becomes.
I'm planning on enhancing the modified coverage plan beginning of January.
Okay, so you're going to have it expanded from what we are currently seeing?
Yes.
To solve that problem?
Right.
All right. And when do we see that? Sometime first week of January, we'll see what that plan is?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sparks?
Yes. Let me just ask a couple of questions. Make sure I got my note here. Let me ask CEO on the issue of the ambulances. Do we have a debt service dollar figure?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Debt service dollar figure for the 432 replacement ambulances?
No, I do not have a debt service. I can have that ready for council.
Okay, so ready for, okay. Okay, the other issue, I'd like to make sure that for upcoming Budget and Finance Committee meeting in January, that we get a briefing on this pending lawsuit in closed session, so we're aware of what the ramifications are and what the dollar impact could be. And then, Chief, just give me just a thumbnail when you say enhanced modified staffing, just what that means.
What we've done is we've developed several options or proposals, and it was predicated on the dollar amount that we were going to need above and beyond the approximate $20 million that we were going to save without the enhanced or expanded modified coverage plan. What we did was we went back and looked at the number of resources that we would need to increase the modified coverage plan over a 6-month period of time in order to achieve that additional savings. And basically, we backed into 3 options. One was a $5.4 million savings. The other was $9.9 million in savings. And then the other, which was a very dramatic cut in fire department resources, yielded somewhere in the neighborhood of $19.8 million in savings. So ultimately, you're looking at over a 6-month period of time, somewhere in the neighborhood of $40 million in savings.
Okay. And what you're looking at on those units that we've identified from paramedic captains to hazmat to special assistants, that you're going to deal with them in a more fluid manner, or are you going to cut some out totally, or how are you going to deal with those line items?
Actually, what we're planning on doing, and that 19, it's separate from, that's not included in this.
Okay, I'm just saying, but how, because in implementing the budget, a couple of those line items were eliminated.
Right.
So I'm just trying to get a sense.
That's a done deal.
Okay, so you're going to implement that portion of it.
Right.
Okay, all right, very good. And then one other thing I just asked, and Mr. Smith covered it, but if, as we're moving through, because we're in very short time order, and the fact that as we get later into the fiscal year, the cuts become even harsher to make these dollar values.
Yes.
So if something, and I know it's all in your power, but if something should come about that alters or redirects your energies, we need to know that.
Yes.
So that as quickly as possible, so that we are aware, because we kind of leave this meeting believing certain things are going to happen.
Right.
And if things get rerouted, we need to know that as quickly as possible.
Right.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate the comment. Let me have the police department, please.
The police department discussions on page 27. In the first FSR, the deficit was reported at 18.1 million. We have now an increased deficit at 35.6. This increase was 8 million due to unbudgeted payout for excess sick leave for sworn personnel and a change in reporting the sworn overtime deficit. We also have a new liability of 9.5 million, and this increase is due to provision in the Police Protective Leave Memorandum of Understanding that requires this payout for uniform allowances with the realization of 100 million savings with that MOU. We do have a operational plan which reduces that deficit to, right now we're reporting about 18.1 million with proposed operational plan solutions. That's excluding earlier proposals to eliminate staff. We have an update on the sworn hiring. Through November 20th, 2010, 120 police officers have been hired. Attrition, however, is higher, 7 higher than projected, so that leaves a net -3 for the department in their total officers on the force. And we have one recommendation in the report, and that's to appropriate 4.5 million from the unappropriated balance to the department's sworn overtime account. This addresses part of the liability for that overtime cost that was identified in the operational plan. So that would reduce their remaining deficit by a corresponding amount.
Okay. We have the police department up, please. Anything from the CLA? Do you have anything to add?
No, nothing to add to this at this time.
Thank you. Police department. We have your presentation.
We're still in discussions about the reimbursable overtime. We believe that all of the 9.7 that they have identified should be will be reimbursed, and therefore that number should be a 0. I can't quite tell from reading their report exactly where we are, but if you add the 4.5 to the 3, we still have an issue of about 2.2 million that we're discussing. And pursuant to your instructions from last week, I will be at council Wednesday to talk about the operational plan. I can do some of it now if you wish.
If you could just give us an overview of how you're going to adjust that $3 million issue.
Oh, the $3 million for the layoffs that we never wanted?
That's right.
Which has been reduced by the, removed by the, a number of ways, one of which is, and there are some adjustments that we would also make to, actually, the department agrees with the police commission that we'd not like to have that $1.5 million for the in-car video removed. We expect to make up the differences with $2 million that we believe we can achieve savings in our FLSA and accumulated overtime account. We believe there's additional revenues of approximately $3 million from false alarms and from the official police garages. We have another $2 million in what is called Fund 339, which is a cleanup of an old account where there's $2 million that have not been reallocated back to the general fund. Plus the fact that we are, by the manner in which we're hiring, even with the plan of attrition, we believe, and this all depends on what happens with the uniform allowance, that we'll have a surplus of over $8 million in that account, which will more than make up for the amounts we've discussed, and the fact that we will have some small deficit in this civilian account.
Go for the uniform allowance. You're saying if you do not hire, then that's $8 million?
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Did you say that if you're not going to hire on sworn, you'd have an $8 million?
No.
Okay.
I said by the manner in which we've managed the hiring, we've saved money, and we will have a surplus at the end of the year, we believe, of approximately $8 million. What I said about the uniform allowance is it depends, one, if it's to be paid, and two, if it's to be paid, where the money comes from. If the money comes from us, then we'll have a deficit.
It does.
Yeah.
And so that's the issue.
Okay. But let me ask you, on your budget, if I understand it, you have a 9.5 as relates to the uniform allowance, and a $8 million for unbudgeted excess sick time.
Well, we didn't.
For clarification, that $8 million is also it's a combination of the excess sick and a change in the calculation. And that's just to account from the difference that was reported from the first FSR. So from the first FSR, there was an increase, and that was just with calculations.
Okay, so calculations not, are we viewing it
Correct.
as part of the deficit?
I'm sorry?
Are you viewing it as part of the deficit?
Well, the deficit, probably the best place to look for the deficit is the operational plan where all the liabilities are listed out. So that would be the source for listing the source of deficit.
I believe their view of the $8 million was the $5 million for the excessive sick time, and then $3 million for the not proceeding with civilian reductions.
Okay. Yeah.
The increase of sick time, you think it's a result of the people that have just run out of overtime and are utilizing that, taking advantage of it?
That's a sick time payout.
Yes, sick time
Which is
payout.
when people.
Oh, for banked?
Yeah.
Banked, okay.
Yes. Yeah.
I thought it was an overutilization, so it's banked sick time.
Yes.
All right. And then the 1.5 million you say you want not included here was for the reprogramming of the in-car video, which we just talked about in public safety.
Yes.
So that needs to be calculated out then.
Which I did.
Okay.
And my point on that, as I stated before, is, as we all know, if you take it out, that means we have to get it in next year, and it becomes harder.
Yeah.
If there's some guarantee
Yeah.
that it was put in next year's budget, then I wouldn't have the same concern.
And to Ms. Parks, what we just requested in public safety was that we very strongly state to the mayor that we expect to see that in the budget, or else we'll take it out of his height someplace else in the budget, and we will put it back in the budget. Just a statement to the council that if we move this money out of in-car video, our commitment remains to in-car video, and that we will see it's in the budget one way or the other next year, so he better put it in.
So we'll move it this year, but the expectation of getting it back next year. So
Yes.
that's the final.
Yes.
And the commission took a very strong action on that, by the
Yes.
way, so we'll be supporting the commission on that.
The commission's view is very strongly that they have a commitment, they've made a commitment to the federal court, and that they would like the money to stay, as I stated before, as was done with the money for Teams 2.
Okay. Okay, so when you mentioned the 9.5,
Yes, sir.
okay, now if that's out of your budget, you say you will have a deficit. Are there any other crunching of numbers that will resolve all or a portion of that?
Of the 9.5?
Yes.
The only other manner is we have to, again, control our hiring, the manner in which we hire. Other than that, as you know, 96% of our budget is people. 4%, about 42 million, is expenses, which was, we believe, and the CIO recognized, was under budgeted by about 3 million. So that's a long answer to a question which, to your question, the simple answer would be no.
Our office intends to report on this in the next FSR. The fact that this trigger was met was identified on Friday, so we need to find some solutions, much like we did with the EAA furlough reduction.
Okay. And then what's the hiring plan for the rest of the fiscal year for sworn?
The present hiring plan is to hire to attrition, but we are constantly adjusting as to when we hire to save money. So the question then becomes, do we hire, for example, the beginning of the month, the beginning of the next DP, or we wait till the beginning of the DP after that to maintain our attrition? Right now, we're down to
9927. The hiring plan is laid out that you adopted. We'd have a January class. As you know, the DP, there's 2 DPs that start in January, so that gives us flexibility. And then the class after that would have been a March class, and then in April, May, and June, only if attrition afforded it. And that was based on the ability to save quite a bit of money by hiring only once a quarter till the last quarter of the year.
Okay. Any view on what the cost will be for fiscal year 11-12 on what you hire, and if you hire to attrition in the last 6 months of this fiscal year?
I think the CAO's recommended from our budget, it was like 11 million. I may have understated that, but I think it was 11 million to our budget and more like 14 or 15 to the cities.
That's the correct number.
I think those are the numbers.
So 11 million for next fiscal year?
Yes.
And then when you say, what would be the overhead and is that what-
15 total. Did I get that?
13.
The CAO analyst is shaking his head yes, so I must have gotten it right.
Let me just ask the CAO, could you fix, and like you've done in your report, a little chart that kind of lays out these numbers that we're talking about today so that we have a little cheat sheet tomorrow so we can, we'll have a sense of where we are on numbers and deficit and what some of the recommendations are, so as opposed to just verbally. We just need something that we can
Okay,
hold on
you
to.
want that for the police department?
Yes, just for the police department, so because it's done verbally, but we do need to be able tomorrow when this comes before, or Wednesday, when this comes to council, we can just have, like what you do in the report, one of the charts that you put together. Okay.
Is that for Wednesday or tomorrow?
Wednesday, I believe, the
Wednesday.
15th.
Thank you. Thank you.
And one thing for later discussion today, when you get to general services, we had a report this morning on opening the Metropolitan Detention Center, which will add about $800,000 in cost to the General Services Department, although the police department doesn't think it should be that high, but it's a discussion that's not on the agenda today, but you need to be aware of that. They need to be aware of that fact. So for budgeting purposes, when we get to General Services, there may be that additional impact that will come forward also on Wednesday.
Okay. And then as we're going today, as we had the discussion in the prior meeting, the civilian issue is off the table now, as far as the 225.
Oh, yes, it's in their report that they've added that back into our budget. And it's, as I said again, it's never our intention to lay off any civilians.
All right. But again, you'll give us that little chart to show how we're going to compensate for the $3 million now that civilians
Yes.
are staying.
I have prepared a chart which I'll share with the CAO.
Okay. All right, if we can get that for Wednesday, then that way when we go through the presentation from the police department, we'll have something to hold our hand on. Okay? Any other questions?
No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Emergency preparedness?
All right, the emergency management discussion's on page 22. All right, in the first FSR, they had a salary deficit projected of $775. It's now up to $1.1 million. However, with the operational plan solutions, this deficit would be completely eliminated.
Okay. Anything from the CLA? Okay. The department presentation?
Go ahead. Morning, Councilmember Parks, Councilmember Smith. In the FSR, it denotes a number of reductions, and it shows some sort of balance as to what's happening with EMD. We were surprised to see, first of all, 2 issues. One was the movement of money from the EOF. The EOF traditionally is used to front fund some programs and training, but more importantly, it's the Emergency Operations Fund for the EOC in the event of an emergency. For example, this year we had to go into the EOF to the tune of $12,000 to repair an overheated server room at one of our locations. That's just a benign incident, but that's what that money is there for. But for the first time, we saw that the money was to be swept when the FSR came out. The other issue, which is a little more complex.
One is how much money is that? The 84,000?
It's the yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, go on.
The other issue, which is a little more complex, is at the bottom of the paragraph. It shows as $49,000 in salary funding from the sewer construction and maintenance fund. And what this is about the supplanting of a general funded EPC position with a sanitation special funded EPC position, which we have been attempting to get moved through the managed hiring process since June. This sanitation EPC funded position is limited to sanitation or public works task only. So we'd basically take a broad-based, broad-scoped EPC who's general funded, move him or her into that position, and they would be focused solely on sanitation or public works issues, so we lose that capability. Originally, the sanitation-funded EPC was to provide a dedicated emergency management support to public works with specific emphasis on sanitation issues. At no time was this sanitation-funded EPC meant to supplant current EMD staffing. To accept what the CAO has proposed actually reduces EMD staffing by one full EPC, and as you're well aware of, we're drastically understaffed, but we've continued to be able to meet our missions. So albeit we're only talking of one position, that position, an order of magnitude, is significant for EMD.
Okay. Let me ask the CEO on that position. Is it our practice in the past when we have a special funded or funding coming from another department, that we basically take it out of the receiving department's budget?
I think you're referring to sort of the reimbursement. I think what we are attempting to do is try to shift some of the costs from the general fund to the funds of sanitation, either through SCM or from SWRF. This is a way to help mitigate the department's projected deficit for the current year.
Okay. But if I understand it, the sewer construction fund is paying for the position. Is that accurate?
Originally, the position that the department is referring to was general funded, and as a way to help mitigate the general fund deficit was to have that person then charge off his or her time to the solid waste fund or SCM.
Okay, so you remove the money from the general fund because
to
you
the special fund,
yeah. With the
but what it does do, though, as Jim, our department, has indicated, it limits that person to only work on sanitation activities.
Okay, and then what was the rationale on the reduction of the $84,000 transfer?
I think here again there were funds identified in the EOF, and there was an option to basically move those into the department to cover their deficit for the current year.
Okay. Now, their primary use of those funds, what will replace them if they have a need during the year?
Ed Rose with the CIO's office. I believe it was a one-time use of funds from the EOF, and they basically represent unencumbered funds.
Okay, but if they use them for, if I understand, maintenance of equipment and things of that nature, how do they fund that during the rest of the fiscal year if we've removed the money?
Well, either we have to identify savings within the budget or ask for an appropriation at this point.
Yeah, per the operational plan, these were one-time prior year savings, the $84,000.
They're not prior year savings. The EOF, as you're aware, Mr. Parks, is treated almost like a trust, and there's a roughly $180,000 a year allocated, and it's meant to be there for. That's why it's called the Emergency Operations Fund.
Yeah, it's an annual allocation, but it's a rollover from the previous year.
Yes, sir.
And explain to me again. It's for usage for maintenance and equipment items during the fiscal year.
It's used for emergency maintenance issues, and also the EOF is used to front fund some of our grant reimbursable training.
Okay. And we've used it that way for like decades?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I was just wondering if we've done it that way, I'm just trying to figure out why we swept it so early, or because that's the fund that's kind of been their one ability to get things done without coming back for an allocation for each item.
I believe actually this, what is being proposed in the operational plan has been done before. We have swept monies from savings in that fund in order to cover basically departmental deficits. Basically, they do get the annual allocation, and then whatever is spent, basically reverts back to the fund. It is used for training and other emergencies. It's also used to pay for the annual workshop, things of that sort.
What's left in the fund if we sweep the 84?
Anna Burton from the Emergency Management Department. Our staff right now is looking at that, but as the CIO mentioned, this is unencumbered funds from previous years. But 2 years ago, when the financial crisis started, they did sweep approximately $300,000, and by the end of the year, we were down to $15,000 total within the Emergency Operations Fund, and we had to cancel all training of city personnel for approximately 4 to 5 months. So we look at, with existing training right now, we will have to cancel training that's already been planned. Several of those courses have not been encumbered because we're still waiting for some approvals before we can actually encumber the funds through the Controller's office.
So I'm more sensitive on that issue than the position issue, but I need for you as a department to get with the CAO before Wednesday to talk about that in the sense, because I would hope we didn't sweep it dry with 6 months left. So we need to know what's left in the fund.
We will work with the department to look at what's left in the fund. I don't believe we're sweeping everything. If this was part of the operational plan that we discussed last week, it was being proposed. I think if the council is looking to perhaps retain those money, then we need to go back to the department and ask them to identify basically another general fund offset to cover those.
But if you can get together before Wednesday, but look at it in the sense that if they have money, if they have something that has been encumbered or that they're planning, we'd hate to unravel that. And again, let's determine what's left, because if we whack them for $300,000 a year or so ago, it takes a while to accumulate that money for their ongoing needs. So we'd ask you by Wednesday to try to reconcile that. Okay. Thank you, sir. Very good. Mr. Smith is going to be leaving us, so we'll continue with just me.
Lovely.
Okay. So we'll move on that, and if you can get with the CAO.
Yes, sir.
Again, on the issue, and they're being driven by this committee about moving things off the general fund, so we're less sensitive about that issue of the position from sanitation. But again, we know the limitations. If sanitation is paying for it, it works on sanitation specific. But I am sensitive about the fund that you need and that rolls over that allows you to operate. And so we'll see how we can manage that.
Yeah, and just generally when it comes to the special funds too, one of the things to look at is if those special funds are able to carry positions. And we've typically allowed special funded positions to be filled through the managed hiring process. But if those funds are also or potentially could be experiencing some sort of a shortfall, that's a consideration as well.
And Mr. Parks, that's one of the things that since June, the response we've gotten back from CAO was that the funding was actually questionable. So if we move an employee from the general fund to the special fund and this funding is not solid, then we still have a significant staffing reduction, not just a limitation on scope. But
the thing is this, is that if we've moved you to special funds, then our commitment should be that the special funds are there.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's what we'll assure. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we can go back to page 1 and let's give us the overview for the report, and then we can kind of walk through it. And the items that you covered in the operational plans and departments that have no changes, you can go very quickly.
Okay.
Right.
Just to make that quick, then that would only be the police department that's had a change.
Okay. But the thing is that the ones that we didn't have operational plans, I think we need to deal with general services and things like that are large dollars. Okay. Transportation, things that have large dollars, just to remind us. But again, we can give us an overview, because I think it's important for the committee report to address the overview, particularly the potential shortfalls, and I think it's pretty clear from this report that we have some very sensitive revenue issues that may not be forthcoming. And so that's the kind of thing I think we need to address.
That's correct. Okay, in the first FSR, we reported a $63.7 million deficit, and most of this deficit was due to general salary costs from delays in layoffs, implementing budget actions, the reductions for furloughs for EAA and other classes, and as well as employment levels. Also in that deficit, we have an sworn overtime liability for both police and fire, and expense accounts for police, fire, city attorney, and GSD also reflected deficits. Now, because of this deficit, council and mayor directed departments reporting deficits to provide operational plan solutions, which we did last week. In that operational plan report, we reported that the deficit increased to $87.9 million, and this was mostly due to changes in the modified coverage plan, some new recognition to the EAA furloughs, payouts for police excess sick time, and the planning department's shortfall in revenue. Departments then identified $67.2 million in operational plan solutions, which budget and finance slightly modified with the elimination of the police layoffs. That reduced the identified solutions to $64.2 million, and that left a revised operational plan deficit of $23.64 million. So with those solutions, at $23.64 million deficits, those were remaining in our city attorney, fire department, and police department budgets. Fire is going to report back in January with the solutions, and there is a city attorney op plan solution that is pending a report from our office on the funding of consumer protection litigation.
Will that be in council on the 15th, or is that after the 15th?
I believe it's after. I don't know.
Anybody from the city attorney's office?
It'll be after.
Okay, it'll be after. That's correct.
Okay, that would we hopefully January? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, we believe that much of the op plan budget gap could be addressed with current appropriations in non-departmental accounts. However, since the op plan, we have identified a new liability of $9.5 million for the uniform allowance payout. We discussed this with the police department when they were up here, and that has increased our deficit to $33.14 million. And as said before, this is triggered by an MOU provision. So like the EAA, reduced furlough savings, our office will identify solutions in the next financial status report. We also have other threats to the budget deficit, primarily from revenue, particularly with regards to the parking concession agreement. So we have some solutions that we'll need to flush out if that doesn't end up being realized. This would include sweeping unspent and discretionary funding in non-departmental accounts, and that would include possibly encumbered funds, suspending the filling of vacant positions that were already approved by the Managed Hiring Committee, curtailing other hiring of new personnel, immediately increasing furlough days for employees, identifying positions for layoffs for the mid-year FSR, transferring funds from the reserve fund, and what's not mentioned in this report is even delaying the opening of facilities.
Let me comment on that before you go further. We like to make sure that our use of the reserve fund is our last resort.
Yes.
And what I'd like to ask when we get back in January, that because of the shortfall and the concern I've had from the beginning, the 53 million, I forget how many people that represented. Did we have a number?
Well, it's probably somewhere on the order of, it's probably more than 1,000 people, and it depends on the time frame that you're talking about.
But we've expended about 6 months of that 53 million in salary. And so therefore, if it's not forthcoming, then for the next 6 months, that 1,000 plus will be even a greater number. Because there is no ability to solve that 53 without additional or new revenue. So with that, in addition to the soft revenue projections that we see for the third quarter of the fiscal year, I think in January we actually have to have an action plan to say how much longer we're going to wait for the 53 if it's not here. I don't think we can survive going 3 quarters without it and then continue to spend. So we need an action plan in January to talk about what absolutely needs to be done for the next 6 months with the expectation that the P3, the soft economic situation, the unknown dollars, 9-point-some million dollars on uniform, all those things that now are creeping up to, closer to $100 million shortfall. We need that action plan in January to say these need to be implemented in the next 6 months.
I would agree, and I think you raise some very good points. As Melissa outlined, we're looking at a number of things, and it will involve everything from additional, perhaps, position reductions, looking at increasing furloughs. It's going to be curtailing all new personnel. Certainly looking at other one-time reductions, looking at expense reductions, maybe even trying to find out whether there's even more money in SPRF. Well, I know that causes a little heartburn in some folks, but certainly we need to do whatever we can.
As long as you pay it back.
To minimize, basically we need to cover everything in the current year without going to the reserve fund.
But I think when I say operational plan or action plan, I think until what I think makes people focus is I think you're going to put numbers in departments, because when we talk about these 5 or 6 asterisks on page 3, they're just mildly interesting to most people that read it until you come back and say furloughs from 26 to 36,
and that's
2,000
what we're talking
employees, removal of X number of positions from these categories. That will then be the point at which people's attention.
I would agree, and we're going to start those conversations internally this week to actually look at those options.
Hiring and impact, sworn and civilian, and whether we're going to hire these. I mean, because one of the things that I think is important and we can't ignore, we have a $300+ million deficit for next year, and when we think about that we could spend $1 million or $2 million this year in hiring sworn, and it costs you $14 million next year. Those are real live numbers that we have to be aware of. And one of the things that caught my eye in the report, we will approach or exceed $900 million just in pension next year. $900 million. And we haven't gotten to medical, and we haven't gotten to personnel. We haven't turned on a light. Just 9, that's almost a quarter of our budget, and it grows the following year. So those are things I think we have to have that action plan that says, here's what we have to do.
And I would agree. One of the, I'm sure Melissa was going to bring up the next item, and that was the 4-year outlook, and the numbers have increased. While we received some good news from Lacers to basically reduce our contribution, unfortunately that was more than offset by pensions. And I think they have estimated a contribution rate of roughly about 39%, which translates to almost $500 million for the sworn personnel.
Yeah. And again, let me ask you this. The fact that Lacers did the smoothing for 7 years, on the other hand, it doesn't stop them from coming to a similar conclusion as fire police by saying our return on investment could reduce, which could pretty well wipe out the smoothing.
I believe the board will consider that reduction next year, and so it won't affect our projected contribution for 11-12. However, certainly 12-13 is another matter.
Because I think most people have come to grips with 8% might not be realistic, but the problem is every quarter point that they drop it just turns to the general fund and says replace it.
You're right. Not only both the reduction in that assumed rate of return, but also making some changes in their health care costs. That certainly didn't help the city as a plan sponsor in looking at those costs. Okay. And while you had mentioned, or we were discussing a little bit earlier, how, yes, if you look at police hiring over the 2 years, it translates to $15 million. I believe we also discussed in personnel and in the joint committee, changes to the current active healthcare plans and co-pays, things of that sort, and that added up another $13 million as well. While all these pieces are maybe appear to be small, but they do add up.
That's right.
And when we're looking at a $300 to $350 million shortfall for 11-12, we need every dime that we can get.
Okay.
And that was going to be my point too, just to reiterate all that, is that we'll need to present a menu of options.
That's right.
And those different things that have been considered in the past and perhaps haven't gone quite that far, these probably all need to be presented so that they can make the policy decisions and deal with this. And it's true that some things may not be a lot on their own, but if you add them all together, it's quite significant. So we need to have those for you.
But I think one of the things, and we just put that as one of the recommendations for the committee report, that we asked for that action plan. But I think the specific nature of the plan is important, but also as we go through that menu, if there are those who want to take certain things out, we need to have option B, C, and D of what replaces that. So it's not just one of those frivolous things that said, remove that, I don't like it, without knowing the consequences.
We would agree.
Okay. All right. So we can add that as a direction. In January, we'll deal with an action plan to come back to the council, because we will have our first allocation of property tax. And what do we expect the mid-year? When is that to be done?
Mid-year is currently planned for early February.
Okay. Would we need to would that be a part of the action plan, be a part of February, or should we be doing something in January?
Actually, I believe we're going to have a discussion on the P3 in early January, and we hope to have a action plan or menu of options roughly the same time.
Okay.
So if one thing doesn't go, then that would be the backup.
Okay, very good. All right, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No problem.
I felt compelled.
Okay, so we already touched on the four-year outlook. We do have revenue projections. Currently, we're on target, which is a variance of 0.4%. However, we have economic forecasts and leading indicators that show a slowing economic recovery. These include continued very high unemployment, depressed housing market, and the end to the fiscal stimulus. So right now, though, we're not recommending any revenue adjustments, but we do expect additional data on December 20th, so this will be contained in the next financial status report.
But there could be a likelihood of revenue projections in the action plan. We'd have some information by then.
Certainly, any new information we'll be happy to report to.
Because if we had a bad property tax just by itself, would require some adjustment.
Yes.
So we can look at that to be part of it if it's appropriate, that the action plan will evaluate the revenue projection.
We'll have an update. We'll provide an update on property tax. We'll provide an update on the sales tax too when we get this quarter true up.
And when we do this at council, I think what's important in your presentation is really emphasize table 3 so that people see just how these balance themselves out. We applaud that we had this property tax increase, but it's money from the previous year, but then it balances out quite quickly when half of them are under what our projections are.
Right.
Okay.
So, you just touched on that. We have economy-sensitive accounts that are showing shortfalls. Our documentary transfer tax is about $1 million below plan per month. Lower sales tax revenue transfer from the state, so that's down $3.1 million. We have parking users receipts that are down. We already mentioned the parking asset restructuring risk. We have $6 million in documentary transfer tax money that we haven't received. $5 million from foreclosure code violations that Building and Safety had reported that they wouldn't be able to collect. $3.1 million down for license permits, fees, and fines.
We're not going to make the $60 million on the foreclosure?
6.
No, we didn't make that?
It does not appear that we will be meeting that target.
All right, okay. I'd spin it.
We also have total utility users tax above plans, but there is a risk to the communication users tax component, about $1.1 million, and this is subject to ongoing litigation involving the federal excise tax and Internet Tax Freedom Act.
And also on that one, could we also add that to January on a briefing as we did the other lawsuit?
Just generally speaking, I think you'd probably want an update on all of the outstanding litigation and that potential exposure. So we can work with the city attorney and come up with a date specific and have that report.
And finally, with parking fines, those are down $3.7 million due to lower citation issuance and delay in implementing the parking citation rate increase.
Let me ask you on that one.
That's been implemented.
Is Department of Transportation, is that because of the cutback on personnel, or what would be the rationale for enforcement reduction?
Oh, that I don't know.
I think the department is here and our analysts as well, but as they come up, and I'm sure they'll correct me if I'm wrong, I believe actually ticket issuance is down somewhat, and the collection of receipts, but I'll wait for Angela to come up here.
Let me ask, if we have LADOT here? Because I was wondering whether there was a shortage of enforcement. They're telling us that the meter rate with the new meters reduces significantly the bad meter issue, and whether that's a part of it, that we're making money on the meters but maybe less on enforcement.
Angela Berman, CAO's office. DOT is not here yet. They will be shortly. But I believe the lower citation issuance might be due to some traffic officer vacancies within the department, but we can also report back.
Okay, if you could do that and for them to be here Wednesday.
Yes.
And then finally, we have revenues that are above plan. Those are property taxes, about $5.9 million, franchise income, motor vehicle license fees, about $1.4 million, and the transit occupancy tax of $6.5 million.
Okay.
Okay. For the reserve fund, we have a reserve fund balance of $178.9 million, and this consists of $120 in the emergency reserve and $58.6 million in the contingency reserve. This is still well below the 5% that is required by the city financial policies. We're currently at 3.97%, so we need another $39 million. In light of looming deficits, we're recommending that we try to build the reserve fund as a top priority to provide an adequate safety net for this fiscal year and for next fiscal year when we'll be facing the $350 million deficit.
And then I think, as be consistent with what we're asking to change in the charter, is that we start a reserve fund, finding a way to report on the stabilization aspect. I think it's $500,000. That we put that in, as we in the future, that we add that as part of the reserve discussion.
Okay, and then we have a couple other issues of concerns with the state budget. Their deficit has gone up, and however, the impact that we're looking at right now is with regards to the gas tax transfer payments. With Prop 22 passing, which prevents the borrowing of certain transportation special funds, the state has stopped deferring the gas tax payments. However, there's still $12.3 million in pending deferred payments that we are owed. And, in conjunction with the passage of Prop 26, the state has stopped making the monthly transfer of the excise gas tax. So this is a cash flow issue. We do think that we'll be okay as long as we do receive that $12.3 million in pending payments. Mostly, if that ends up being taken by the state to address their budget deficit, there is a risk to projects. And then finally, we've identified in the discussion section, of course, our department salary sections, which you've asked for a report back on. So that covers the summary section.
Just an update, actually, regarding the state budget. There is a lot of activity right now in regards to how the state is going to be interpreting Prop 22 and 26 guidelines. It has come to our attention today that there is movement within the League of California Cities in that area. The state controller had taken a certain action in December, and now we're hearing that they may hold off on continuing to interpret propositions in a way that's favorable to the city. There is going to be additional movement. We are looking at it closely, and just wanted to point out to the committee that January, the state controller may be doing things differently.
Let me ask, any new information on CRA funding at all?
No, but we will work with the league and other sources to try to give an update, both on the gas tax and any other issues that's going on with the state.
Thank you.
Okay, so for the summary section, there are attachments 1, which A through J, which discusses the revenue. I don't know if you want to save that for the end or.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so with the recommendations that are in this report, we recognize that there's a 33.14 million deficit across all departments. With the transactions that are included in that report, which total 58.9 million, 17.4 million of these transactions are recommendations that were included in the operational plan. And then there's 4.6 million in transactions that address department deficits that were not included in the operational plan. So the discussion section begins on page 15 with aging. They're reporting a surplus.
Let me just ask you one thing. I'm
Sure.
going to catch up with my note. Okay, on number 13, you're going to add in there what the debt service is?
Yes.
Okay, and also on libraries, on number 14, we had a note that they owe us a report back on their implementation of volunteer programs. Okay, we'll go to discussion.
Anything
Okay.
else? Okay.
No.
Aging is on page 15. The department's reporting a special fund surplus of $385,000 and a general fund surplus of $175,000. Aging's received approval to fill grant-funded vacancies, and that is probably going to reduce some of that surplus to 201. And the department is working with grantors on other alternative use for the remaining grant-funded salary savings, which would otherwise be returned to the grantor if not spent. Animal Services has a deficit of $178,000, which will be implemented with the full implementation of the operational plan. They are behind in receipts by about $500,000. There is an ordinance pending for the omnibus dog licensing, which may recover some of that lost revenue.
Can we get a date on that, when that should be forthcoming?
Yes. Okay, for building and safety, they have a deficit of $350,000 projected for their overtime salaries account, which will be eliminated with the approval of recommendations in this report. They have staffing needs that are driven by some of the layoffs, and they have fees that are recovering those costs.
In that item on the foreclosure, this may be one of the reasons that we have to readjust our revenues.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
No, I said on the item of the foreclosure, the non-compliance, because of that shortfall, this is one of the reasons we will have to should be reconsidering our revenue projections as part of that that action report. That one, it's a couple of them that did not come up close to, including P3, didn't come up close to the revenue that people projected.
All right, the CAO, we're going to complete the year within budget, but we do have a recommendation to transfer $21,000 from the UB. This is to pay for ERIP payouts for a previous employee of the Human Services Department. The city attorney, as reported in the operational plan, has a current shortfall of $10.8 million. With the full implementation of operational plan solutions, this deficit is reduced to $4.2 million. They do have transactions in this report that address some of that deficit. They have an $82,000 internal transfer to pay for bar due costs. These costs were deferred last year. They now paid it this year out of this year's allocation, so they have this year's bar due payment that is owed. That only addresses part of that cost, so there's $148,000 from the UB to pay for the balance of that, and that would reduce that department's deficit if approved. And then finally, we have a $750,000 transfer from the UB litigation expense account line item. This is to address the deficit due to the complexity of cases being filed. However, there's still another 1.2 million shortfall that needs to be addressed, and that was already identified in the operational plan.
Okay. Now, on that report back on the consumer investigations, when do we expect that back?
We should have it back by January.
January. Now, the issue there is, we've gone over this several times, is that we fund the positions, and these settlements often, we've historically viewed them as being a reimbursement. Is there some new information since?
At this point, no, I don't have any new information. I think when we report back with that report, we'll provide a full update.
Okay. The one thing it appears, and this just as a layperson looking at this, the only way they're going to address their shortfall is to cut personnel. I don't think they're going to get around it, and so we need to put that emphasis forward. The other issue in dealing with this budget, I think we just have to keep reemphasizing that settlements, we cannot balance the budget on settlements. Those go to the general fund, so that we can get some clarity as to operationally how that budget should be functioning. So if we can get that report in January about the consumer fraud issue, and then also part of that action plan should be how are they going to reduce that budget on personnel, because that's the only way they're going to get under that $10 million issue.
All right, the next page is city clerk. They have a deficit of $146,000 in their salaries general account, which will be fully addressed with an EAA transfer to cover the reduced furlough savings for EAA. They are reporting that there's a potential shortfall of $2 to $3 million, and it's still a rough estimate, and this is due to the increase in the voter information pamphlet and official sample ballot that would, it's from the size of the ballot and the cost of publishing.
Is this for March or is this for May?
Well, that would be for March, and that's something they may want to just watch to see how the May election shapes up, because there is funding available for May. So depending on how that, what's required there, that's just something to watch for the next couple months.
Okay, very good.
CDD is projected to operate within budgeted funding. They filled they're authorized to fill 304 positions. They filled 278. They report that they have sufficient resources to provide full cost recovery for all filled positions. However, they are reporting that revenue will be reduced from 12.4 to 3 million due to adjustments in the currently approved cap rate. They have transferred approximately 1.2 million to the general fund.
And we, in January, will have a budget and finance agenda on the cap rate?
Yes.
Is that January 2011?
Thank you for the clarification.
All right. The department has proposed an additional revenue reduction of 2.5 million using this cap rate for 9/10 payments. We haven't received justification, so we're asking for recommendations to include instructions for the department to report back within 30 days with an analysis for this reduction.
Okay.
So we have several transactions. One is the one I just mentioned. We also have an appropriation of $203,000 of CDBG ARA funds to the department's operating budget for direct and indirect salary costs to administer the grant. We have an appropriation of $461,000 in enterprise zone tax credit funds to allow the department to pay for costs associated with the administration of that program. We have an appropriation of $370,000 from the UB Early Retirement Fund payout, and this is ERIP funds that were funded by CDBG ARA, Community Services Block Grant Funds, and Workforce Investment Act funds. We have an appropriation of $385,000 in CDBG funds to pay for direct and indirect salary costs to ITA. We have a revision to recommendations from a previous report. And finally, we have an appropriation of $546,000 in CSBG ARA funds to pay for the administration and program staff costs associated with the administration of that grant for CDD, Rec and Parks, Public Works, and Sanitation.
Okay. Let me just say thank you to the CAO and the CDD. I think about 3 years ago, they were like $5 million hit on the general fund, and we progressively moved that down to where they're working within their own resources and they're off the general fund. So that's been a long journey.
The Controller's Office, they have a year-end deficit of $433,000. This assumes that the department will be able to fill all 8 positions as early as January as part of the Phase 2 hiring as approved by the Managed Hiring Committee. However, if hiring is maintained at the current level, the deficit can be reduced to about $67,000. The department believes that they have sufficient funds that are so that they could proceed with the Phase 2 hiring, assuming a future appropriation for the EAA reduced furlough savings.
Okay.
Convention Center is projected to complete the year within budget. They do have a few transactions. One is an appropriation of $300,000 to their salaries as needed and overtime count to deal with several shows. This funding is needed for part-time expenditures to provide support to support basic functions and generate revenue. They have a transfer of $250,000 to the salaries as needed account from surplus of the salary general account for the same purposes. And then they have an appropriation of $102,000 from the building operating equipment account for current year convention center revenue for a variety of needs.
Do we have any timeline on their flexible parking request?
As far as I know, that's been referred to the TCT committee, and it's maybe still be pending there, but we can get an update.
Okay. Could we see how quickly, because one of the dilemmas we have is they have that standard $12 parking, and when everybody around them is charging $4, they charge $12, and when everybody around them is charging $25, they're charging $12. So we do need to give them some flexibility in that area. So if we can find that report.
Okay, we have some transfers for council, $300,000 from salaries general to contractual services, $1 million from salaries general to salaries ad needed, $50,000 from Clark's recycling account to the GCP Community Services District 14, and $235,000 from council's street furniture account to the salaries as needed account. And these
Let me
are
ask you on that last one, is that legal?
Could you say that again? I'm sorry.
On that last one, is that by the specific guidelines of the street furniture? Can it be used outside those guidelines? On that fourth asterisk on page 21, dealing with council.
Yes.
Is that legal to use those street furniture funds for salary?
As long as the funds are being used for staff to work on beautification projects, that would be consistent with the administrative code establishing the use of the street furniture funds.
Okay, so that's what that's going to be used for?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Cultural Affairs has a deficit of $242,000, which will be completely addressed by the operational plan solutions, which includes an appropriation for the reduced EAA furlough savings and $103,000 in reimbursements for public arts projects. We do have a recommendation to transfer $247,000 from the Arts and Cultural Facilities Services Trust Fund to the department's salaries as needed account and administrative and art and music expense accounts. This is in conjunction with council approving the partnering of the cultural and art facilities, which was supposed to become effective January 1st this year, so that appropriation has already been set aside. However, they're going to need some additional funds, so there will be a report forthcoming.
So that RFP is out now as far as those facilities?
I don't believe so. That's why we'll have a report forthcoming.
Okay, all right. Yeah, because one of the things we're also attempting to do is to, we talked to Mr. Labange. He has all of the non-cultural affair buildings in committee, and we need to get those before ITGA and Budget and Finance, so we could move forward on those nonprofit policies.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, disability is projected to complete the year within budget. El Pueblo will have a $50,000 deficit, which they hope to recover with revenue from rental income. EMD we discussed, Employee Relations Board has had a $20,000 deficit, which they're addressed with moving funds internally. Ethics has a deficit of $193, which will be addressed per operational plan solutions. They also have a $90,000 surplus in their trust fund, which we'll address in the next FSR. Finance.
Thank you for that. All right, and DOT. Okay, that wraps it up.
That's it.
Before you say, because he kept saying, I understand you guys really support what we're doing. Okay, thank you. Yes, sir. Next one.
Okay. With finance, we have a deficit of $967,000, which will be completely addressed with an appropriation for the reduced EAA furlough savings. Fire department, we did discuss. General services, at this time, are reporting a deficit of...
Let me go back one. When are we going to have finance come in and talk to us about their 11-12 budget?
That's the special fund?
Yeah.
Finance is putting something together, and we're meeting with them. What we wanted to do is have something before the budget comes forward. I believe what finance is doing is that may be part of their budget proposal, but we can take a look at it and report before then.
Okay. All right. Okay, we've done fire. Okay.
Okay. So we have GSD. With the operational plan, we reported a deficit of $10.4 million, so that excludes any discussion of opening the jail. The operational plan solutions eliminate this deficit, and so we do have several transactions that were part of the operational plan. These include the $600,000 transfer from the store's revolving fund, an increase in funding from the street resurfacing program, and there's a follow-up request under street services. We have sufficient funds to provide funding for GSD, but this will result in a 16-mile reduction in the Bureau's 235-mile goal. We have a transfer of $1.1 million from the general fund appropriations to the field equipment expense account and petroleum products account. And then we have several transfers and savings in expense and special accounts to offset the department's deficit.
I think all those comments we made on that department during the operational plans, that's information we need back.
Mm-hmm. Housing, we have a special fund surplus of $2.3 million. The department is exempted from the managed hiring process to provide transfer opportunities. Depending on how they fill these positions, their ability to meet revenue projections from related cost reimbursements may depend on this staffing level. So there may be transfers of special fund reserves which were set aside to cover the ERIP retiree payouts.
Let me ask you that second to last sentence, could you kind of explain? I didn't quite understand their ability to meet revenue projections.
I believe the issue is as they increase staffing, of course, that's more reimbursements that they have to make for direct and indirect salary costs. So if there's been some money set aside in the UB line item for ERIP, and those are special fund monies that were set aside, and if that's needed, there will be a transfer in another report to cover that cost.
Okay.
ITA is now reporting a deficit of $4.9 million, and the operational plan completely addresses these deficits. We have a couple transactions. One is to transfer $3 million in savings from the communication services, contractual services, and office and admin accounts to the salaries general account to offset this deficit. And then aside from that, they have a $20,000 transfer in revenue accounts to pay for CSRs for rec and parks and other departments. Library, they have a deficit of...
Let me just ask on that. For January, we're going to get some type of a Google update and also a public access update.
Yeah, there were a few things that you had requested updates on Google, the public access, the TDA account. I think there's one other thing which is escaping me right now, but we'll make sure that those are scheduled.
All right, thank you.
Library has a deficit of $3.4 million, but with the implementation of the operational plan, this will be eliminated. They do have a shortfall in fees and fines, which is attributed to the reduced service days. They are looking to seek approval from their board to increase fines to mitigate this shortfall. In this report, they have a request to increase their general salaries account by $2.7 million from the library's fund cash balance. And then we also have, in conjunction with that, a recommendation for them to report on the utilization of their unreserved and undesignated account. Neighborhood Empowerment has a deficit of $171,000. This is from the reduced furlough savings of EAA represented employees. The department does have the authority to fill 3 vacant positions from the Managed Hiring Committee, but delaying the hiring date for these positions does not fully resolve this deficit. So there is an operational plan to suspend the authority for 2 positions and appropriate funds, which from the reduced furlough savings, which would then cover this deficit. Personnel, we have no deficit reported at this time. Planning, as we discussed earlier, there's a deficit of $2.6 million from projected revenue shortfall, and we have operational plan solutions that should mitigate that. With regards to the planning case processing special fund shortfall, they expect to receive $10 million instead of the $11.6, and this is due to delay in the implementation of the second phase of that land use fee. If council adopts that ordinance by the 3rd quarter, they do project to receive funds to offset some of that shortfall. Okay. With regards to the remaining deficit.
Let me ask on planning. Is that shortfall attributed to a lack of personnel to do the work or just a lack of work coming through the door?
I understand that the shortfall is more due to the revenue from the fee.
That is the ordinance?
Yes. Okay. So because the fee was delayed, there's a revenue shortfall.
Good morning, Council Member. I'm Eva Yuan McDonough with the Planning Department. The shortfall is partially due to the delay in the implementation of the overhead. As you recall, by July 1st this year, we should have implemented the 50% of the citywide overhead, but because of the delay in the ordinance, we probably will not be able to implement until early February 2011. So the estimated loss in that delay is about $500,000, but we should be able to collect still about over $500 in the second half of the year. And then also the shortfall is due to the lower case filing. The Planning Department's revenue deficit actually is $1.6 million. The other $1 million in deficit is due to the EAA reduced furlough days, and that's about $1 million. And the department see in the proposal that there's some fund transfer being proposed to address that issue.
Okay. But the ordinance is been approved, it just was delayed in getting approved.
Yes, ordinance actually was got out of the city attorney's office Monday last week, and should be on council on the 1st of January.
Right, it hasn't been approved yet, it's been transmitted, and I believed it was waived from Plum, but there's also a public notice requirement on that, so I think the intent is to have that on the first council meeting in January.
Yes, and then 30 days, that makes it about February, we should be able to start collecting.
Okay, thank you.
So the operational plan proposes to address the remaining deficit by holding positions vacant for $1.6 million, and then as she had mentioned, we're going to have about $700,000 transfer to address the reduced EAA furlough savings. In this report, we have recommendations to appropriate $109,000 in special funds for the Jordan Downs specific plan. We have an appropriation of $415,000 for the Cornfield Arroyo Seco redevelopment plan, and $460,000 for EIR studies for the San Pedro, Sylmore, Granada Hills, and West Adams new community plans.
For council, could we get a planning, give us an update of status where we are on the existing community plans that are in process? I think it's, 10 of them?
We're currently working on about 7, but some of them are coming forward very soon. I will relate your request back to our management and make sure we have a status for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, the police department we discussed. Public Works Board, they have unfunded liabilities of $492,000. That was reported in the op plan, but these will completely be addressed with the operational plan implementation. They are recommending that $428,000 be transferred back from the contractual services account to the CD15 Real Property Trust Fund. Okay, for Bureau of Contract Administration, they have a $730,000 surplus. However, these funds may be needed to address workloads, particularly with the modernization of the Tom Bradley Terminal. The department reports that it will be unable to meet its revenue target of $2.38 million from the Prop O bond program. We will be reporting back on that revenue estimate in the subsequent FSR. Engineering is projected to have a surplus of $7.14 million, primarily from the Sewer Capital Fund, and the department reports meeting revenue estimates. With sanitation, we have a surplus of $10.2 million across all special funds as a result of vacancies and expense savings. However, they are projecting a $10 million deficit in receipts from SCM. This revenue reduction will be offset by $5 million in projected operational budget savings, $1 million in an SCM solid waste resources revenue fund swap, and additional savings in special fund appropriations to offset that. We have a...
Good morning, Councilmember and Chair of the Committee. Neil Guglielmo with the Bureau of Sanitation. We also have a requested transfer from our 1010 salaries accounts to cover projected deficits in both our 1070 as-needed salaries account and 1090 overtime accounts. The reason for the projected deficits primarily is because of the high number of vacancies we have in the Bureau of Sanitation. We are, as of the end of November, at 379 vacancies in our special funded positions. So we have a large year-end surplus projected in our 1010 salaries account. Because of the need to maintain operations and staffing, we have been using overtime and part-time staff, hence the need for the additional funds. We have provided to the CAO and the committee clerk a requested transfer for that to cover that deficit. It would be $3.5 million from our 1010 salaries account, which is roughly a third of the total projected surplus by year end. And we are projecting to transfer that in increments of $1.65 million to the 1070 account in the Solid Waste Resources Fund, $125,000 in the 1070s account SCM, $1.5 million in the 1090 overtime account SCM, and $225,000 in the 1090 overtime account for stormwater. So that is our request.
So those amendments, attachment 4?
That's correct. There already is an attachment 4, which is a transfer between accounts, and this is would just be added to that.
Okay.
Okay, and this is in addition to a recommendation to use $1 million in SCM funding to replace that with the Solid Waste Resources Revenue Fund, and that covers their transactions.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Street lighting, the department will complete the year with approximate special fund surplus of $362,000 attributed to its salaries general account. They have a high vacancy rate among staff, so they continue to use hiring hall and overtime to keep projects and maintenance staff on schedule. We have a few recommendations. There's $130,000 transferred from Prop C to department's overtime account to restore bike path lighting along the LA River bike path. We have a transfer of $475,000 from the Community Development Trust Fund to the department for the Elysian Valley Lighting Improvement Phase 3 project. And we have a transfer of $700,000 from the Community Development Trust Fund to the department for the Sun Valley Lighting project. Okay. With street services, they have a net year-end surplus projected for the department. There is some heads up on Measure R, which provides a 1/2 sales tax increase for a variety of improvements to the county's transportation system. The city chose to use these funds to accelerate ramp construction, for which the department received $3.2 million in 2000 for this fiscal year. But these funds require that they are not supplanting general funds, so we're going to review this issue to determine if additional funding is needed to meet that requirement. We do have several transactions. We have $15,000 from the Subventions and Grant Fund for the 5th Street and Stradella Road repair project. We have a transfer of $17,000 from the Century City Neighborhood Traffic Protection Trust Fund for the Cheviot Hills replanting project. We have $37,000 from the Urban Development Action Grant Fund to reimburse special events for the farmers market subsidies. We have a transfer of $84,000 from the gas tax to BOE Special Services Fund for design on the Westchester Streetscape project. And then, as discussed with the GSD discussion section, we have a reduction to the Street Damage Revenue Fund for BSS expense accounts by $5.6 million, and this money is now being used for GSD. And as I mentioned earlier, that would reduce their miles by 16. Rec and Parks, the department is projected to complete the year within budget. They do have a surplus in their salaries that's about $2.1 million, which may be needed to offset potential revenue shortfalls, which is projected about $1.3 million. This is from indirect cost reimbursements from golf operations, as well as revenue shortfalls in Griffith Observatory pools, rec centers, and reimbursements from special funds. Transportation, they had a deficit of $4.4 million. With the op plan, there will be a transfer from EAA reduced furlough savings, which reduces this deficit to $4 million, and then the rest of the op plan solutions eliminate the deficit entirely. These transactions are included in this report. This includes transferring $760,000 from salaries as needed and other expense accounts to the salaries general account. We have a transfer of $489,000 in reimbursements for special events. We have an appropriation of uncommitted interest income from the Automatic Traffic Surveillance and Control Trust Fund to partially pay for salaries. And then in addition to the op plan, we also have a transfer of $1 million from that same fund to reimburse general fund indirect costs related to the special funded positions performing this work.
I think we have somebody here from DOT now. I'd just like them to comment on this issue of reduction in their enforcement and fees and fines.
Good morning, Councilmember. I'm sorry I didn't hear your question.
No, it's on one of our early charts on revenue. It shows that, I think we're on page 5, that we have on parking fines something like a $3.7 million shortfall. We're trying to figure out what has caused that. Is that from lack of resources Or do the new meters play a role in that, or just why we would have such a significant shortfall?
Oh, great, thank you. I think the large component that makes the 3.7 was the unfortunate the delay in getting the actual ordinance approved in time, where I think it was about a 46-day delay. So I think that's roughly about $2 million out of the 3.7.
On the ordinance on what, raising the fees?
Yes. Yeah, that was, I believe it was supposed to happen July 1. I think it happened on August 13th or 15th. As far as the others, council member, we're seeing throughout the city, some areas there is a better compliance now that we have put in more parking meters that take credit cards and are operational 99% of the time. I think the public is happy about that, and they are actually, making payments and things. So we are a 24/7 operations. I think our number of vacancies within our parking enforcement is about 44, if I'm not mistaken. And the peak crunch of when the citations occur and trying to really stretch ourselves thin has created some gaps where we can't just put in those officers. So having said that, I think in our budget plan, we've got some ideas, some creative ideas to help with that part. So we'll be bringing that forward to you. But I think it's not one thing, council member. It's just really a combination of many little things that's causing that number to slide a little bit. I just talked to our Chief of Parking Enforcement before coming here, and he assured me that as far as even with 44 vacancies and everything else that I mentioned, where our officers are doing a good job out there, and we've had within the last 6 months worked with Bureau of Street Services. Some of the street cleaning routes were either canceled or being worked on because of the equipment, the fleets. All that's been fixed now, and we're on a better cooperation with them and really getting after the violations. But we have to have violations. You have to have cars that are driving and going out in order to see if they're violating or not. But hopefully we'll keep CAO, CLA, and everybody apprised of our progress, and if there's any real shortfalls or any other trends that we see, we'll be happy to report that to you.
Give us a thumbnail on where we are on new meters.
The first 10,000 have been successfully installed. We just came to the Transportation Committee with really a positive report of how the impact, which has been great. Revenues are up. A number of complaints to our meter hotlines are down. The overall operability of the meters are around 99%. And in fact, we have a report that's coming from Transportation Committee to the City Council on expanding the next 10,000 to be able to amend that contract and also go into some other areas in the Los Angeles to be able to put some of these meters there. So that should be coming to Council, I believe, this week.
Okay. And then where are we on the RFP for what is it, ACS?
That is, staff are working on that right now. We're getting input from the Office of Finance, and we're asking also of our controller to see if there's any recommendations they have. But we're maybe a few weeks, as much as maybe the first part of January for that RFP to be released.
When does it expire?
The contract expires March of 2011.
And then last question I have is any update on the cab franchise?
On which one?
The taxi franchise.
Oh, taxi franchise was published, I believe, on the evening of November 30th. So we should become effective December 30th.
And then the cleanup work as it relates to the study and the process of getting the cabs green, where are we on that?
So this was actually the first part was the council's authority to extend the 5-year. That was approved. Now we went through Board of Taxi Commissioners, and the ordinances and the has been approved, has been published. with the caveat that 80% of all city taxi fleets will be green in 5 years. So we have that program in place, and all 9 franchisees will have that in writing to them, along with all the penalties and all the teeth that we have mentioned, that if they don't comply, that they might lose there'll be heavy penalties and or losing their franchise. So
the
that's
Taxi
moving
Commission,
forward.
Taxi Commission has approved the increased standards?
They have. Okay. The second reading is actually this coming Thursday.
Okay, thank you. Next one.
Okay. The treasurer has a projected deficit, surplus of $82,000, which was a result of delaying filling vacancies. However, they anticipate they'll need this surplus to offset a projected deficit in the bank fees account, which we cannot quantify at this time. The zoo department is projected to complete the year within budget. They have a surplus in their salaries account of about $1 million. They'd like to hold on to it to offset potential revenue shortfalls. However, they do have year-to-date attendance and revenue above budget amounts, but there has been a drop in attendance in October. With regards to the parking fee implementation, the department reports that it continues to work with GSD and its parking consultant on developing a plan to implement the best and most feasible pay parking system there. And that concludes the departmental discussion.
Okay.
Section 2 is our non-departmental discussion that begins on page 34. With GCP, we are reporting no deficits at this time. We do have a recommendation to transfer $19,000 from a retirement contributions account to set up a new account for LACERS for the reimbursement of lifetime monthly payments to a former employee. LACERS has administered this payment since the inception of the agreement, and the city has been reimbursing it. However, Tax Council has advised that LACERS cannot use existing funds to make that payment, so we will be providing funds for them to make payments from directly. With Human Resources Benefit Funds, there's a deficit.
Let me ask you, what does that period cover with the $19,000? Is that monthly, annually, or?
I believe this is half a year, so it'll probably double for the next year.
So this payment is a 6-month payment?
This is 6 months payments because LACERS has made payments up until now.
Okay, thank you.
Human Resources Benefits Fund has a deficit projected for the civilian flex account. It's now to $10.8 million. The flex account is dependent on the number of layoffs for this year. The department's also projecting a deficit for workers' compensation count of $3 million. We do have $13.4 million set aside in the UB to address shortfalls in this fund. With the liabilities claims account, we don't have...
Let me ask you on that one. Is that the report we're having at Council Wednesday that talks about freezing?
I don't know your report, Council, on Wednesday.
Is this the freezing?
The report that you're referring to are the JLMBC recommendations.
No, I thought it was another one that we had where we're freezing the account.
The freezing, basically the medical subsidy, that is actually on the retiree, so that does not affect this here.
Very good, okay.
Liability claims account, there's no shortfalls anticipated. Reserve funds, we did discuss, and there's no recommendations with reserve fund at this time. The unappropriated balance, we have a request to transfer $25,000 from the reserve fund to the unappropriated balance general account, and this will fund previously appropriations made via motions, and it's expected that these appropriations will be reimbursed.
Yeah. Let me just comment. The only concern I had on several of the comments on the UB, that when we made transfers to help them balance their budget, but yet they still continue to stay out of budget and that deficit is growing. I have a concern that we are basically moving money there and they're not also making efforts to reduce the deficit within their department.
Are you referring specifically to the city attorney and the police department transfers?
Yeah, those, I mean, where we're moving money, and again, we made a commitment that things we imposed on their budget, we would make every effort to try to balance those. But if they're not internally managing their budget and we're trying to cut these shortfalls, it seems like we're working at counterproductive.
Now, the two transactions that we recommended in this report are required because there's a liability that's coming due. We have
Yeah,
bar due
I see.
payouts, and so that's why we appropriated for
Well, no,
that.
I understand why you did it. I just would like to see the departments making a little bit more effort. And you're closing a gap for them, yet their gap on their own is increasing.
Okay.
That's what I'm concerned about. I would like them to be as diligent as you are.
Okay, after that, that's just, that's it for the recommendations in this report. So if you want to discuss the rest of the report?
I think it pretty well covers everything.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything else I have questions on. No, I don't have any other questions. I just have one additional recommendation that we talked about the action report. Let me see. Yeah, clearly that we need that action report in January that deals with the potential reduction in revenues, also the shortfalls in revenue, and the such things as the P3, the documentary transfer, the code violations. All those appear to be fundamentally important to look at whether our projections are accurate. And then I think we just need to, in this report, re-emphasize to all general managers that they need to implement their budget as prescribed July 1st, 2010, and as we move forward, and that the things that they did not implement, they need to make adjustments to find those additional funds that they did not address in the first 6 months. So we really need to re-emphasize that we put in that letter. And then any ordinances that are due, we need to get with the city attorney and ensure that, particularly revenue generators, that those ordinances, we're now 6 months into the fiscal year, that ordinances that are revenue producers have to be done, we hope by no later than January 2011, that we get them before council. So those are my 3 additions, and I think when this report, we'll move the recommendations of the CAO with the amendment of attachment 4 and the comments that we made during the deliberation. Okay. And let me ask this, my colleagues, no other questions? Okay. We have no other comment cards. Do you have anything else from the CAO, CLA?
I think
okay. Thank you very much. We'll move that report with those recommendations.